So let me show you how to set up sublocation management. So first thing you need to do is go to System Preferences, and you need to enable sublocation management. So under Merchandise, Sublocations, go ahead and select Enable Sublocation. Okay, and you have some other defaults here as well, if you like, but this is the key one. Okay, the next step is to define the number of characters allowed per segment that is being used to build your sublocation code. Okay, so you can think of this as similar to the department, class, and subclass levels. So a sublocation code is made up of segments, right? And each segment, you can define the max number of characters allowed. So if you have sublocation codes that are built from 3 segments, for example, in a auto parts store, they might have aisles and then shelves within aisles and then boxes within shelves. So you might have 3 segments in that case that builds a sublocation code. And for each one of those segments, you can define a max segment character. Okay, so for us, we're going to keep it really simple. We'll just do one segment, basically a sublocation code that's built from one segment, and that one segment will have a maximum of 7 characters. And we're also going to require this. Okay, so at this point, let me just save quickly. So you're pretty much done in System Preferences at this point. Let's back out. Your next step is to build the primary sublocation. Okay, now the primary sublocation is basically your default sublocation before you start moving quantities between sublocations. Okay, and this default, this primary sublocation, will be used again by default on all of your documents. So we'll just go over to Tech Toolkit. Let's go ahead and log on. And it's way down here under Data Maintenance, Inventory, select to include, select the subsidiaries you would like to build, and then select Initialize, and then select Start. It's a pretty quick process. We're done. So let's back out. So again, we just built our primary sublocation, and this will become your default sublocation for all documents moving forward. Okay, so let me do a quick check. We'll go over to Inventory. We'll pick an item, and on the side menu, I will add a button called Sublocation Quantity. Okay, it's way down here in the bottom. And notice for this particular item, we have 10 units, and it's in the primary sublocation. Fantastic. Now, let's go build our sublocations. So back out to the home screen, we'll select Merchandise, we'll select Sublocation. Notice we have our primary sublocation. We'll select New. And now we're actually building our sublocation code based on X number of segments. In our example, it's going to be very simple. We're just going to have one segment that will be used to build our sublocation code. And in our scenario, let's say that we have broken up our stores into several different parts. Let's say you have the sales floor, which will be our primary, by the way. And also you have merchandise that be on display. You have merchandise that you loan out to customers, or you have merchandise that you actually loan out to employees for employee uniform. So those will be our different parts within a given store that we want to make sure that we can track merchandise within those different parts. Okay, so let's do the first one here. Let's do one for employee. So under segment value, we'll just type in the value we want. I'll give it a name usually, just so it's a little easier to understand. So we'll call this employee uniform. And I'll also do the same thing for sublocation description, employee uniform. Then we'll save, and we're done. So it's really that simple. Again, if you have multiple segments that are used to build a sublocation code, all you have to do is hit the down arrow and input another segment, and Retail Pro will automatically build the sublocation code. Let's do another one. Again, this time let's do it for our display case. So we'll call this display. For segment name, we'll say on display, and we'll use that same segment name for our description. Done. Next, let's do one for VIP. So again, we'll input VIP as a value. We'll call this customer loaners. And again, I'll just copy this and use it also for my description and save. So let's go over to list view and see what we have. So we have the primary sublocation. Okay. We also have employee, display, VIP. So these are all the different parts of my store that I would like to be able to track. Now, notice that everything I did was for store 000. If I switch over to store 1, notice I have no sublocations at store 1 right now, with the exception of the primary. And same thing for store 2 and so on. So what I can do is I can manually recreate those sublocations at store 1 if indeed store 1 has the same sublocations as store 0. Or what I can do is I can just copy it across. So if I select this sublocation, I can select assign store, then I can say copy to store 1 or store 1 and 2 and 3 and so on. I'm just going to copy to store 1. And I'll do the same thing for that sublocation and the same thing for this last sublocation. All right. And notice now at store 1, I have those same sublocations, but at store 2, again, only the primary. Okay. Now you should understand that creating sublocations across multiple stores will use up sublocations within your licensing. Okay, so if you're only licensed for 20 sublocations, you need to keep that in mind. So if you copy your sublocations across all stores, you might run out of sublocations. Okay, so keep that in mind. Let me go back to my default here. Now, before we leave, the last thing I want to do is I would like to customize the primary sublocation. Again, keep in mind this is my default sublocation. So it's going to be used by default, unless I change it, on all of my documents. So in my example, let's pretend that my primary sublocation is really the sales floor. So I receive into the sales floor. I sell from the sales floor. I transfer from the sales floor. Okay, so in essence, I'm using the primary as my sales floor. Okay, so I'm going to just change the value here, and I'm going to actually call it sales floor. Okay, so it makes sense for me, and this is sales floor, and same thing here. Okay, now you don't have to do this, but I like to do it just so I know what I have. All right, and you need to do this for all of your stores. So let me do the same thing here. This is my sales floor, and I'll copy this across. And I'm done. So these are all my sublocations that I have for these two stores. Okay. Oops, I made a quick typo there. So for this one, let me change it to sales floor. All right, now it's all consistent. Let me back out. And the only other setting that you may need to define is again in system preferences. And this would be going into the same area, merchandise sublocation, are your default sublocations. So again, by default, if you don't define anything here, Retail Pro will use your primary sublocation as your default. Okay, it will be similar to like default stores. So by default, it's using your primary sublocation. But you can, if you like, set up another sublocation as a default. For example, here at store 0, when I create a receipt, okay, I want the sublocation to be, right? And so on. Now, it doesn't make sense in my scenario to do this because I want my primary to be my sales floor, and by default, I want the sales floor to be used on all documents, including receipts, right? If you had another scenario where you have a back room and you receive into the back room and then you transfer to the sales floor, then it would make sense to have a default sublocation for, say, vouchers that was back room. So when you create a new voucher, automatically it will be received into that store, that sublocation. Okay, so I'm not going to set any defaults. Let me cancel that. So we're pretty much done at this point. Let me show you one quick example on how this works. So let me receive into a sublocation. So I'm creating a voucher. We'll select new. Actually, let me cancel this really quick. And I'm going to go to Form View, and I want to show you the sublocation. So I will go into Page Designer. I will grab the sublocation code field. There it is. And let me drop it in here so you can see it. Okay. So it's not a pretty screen design, but you'll be able to see that sublocation code. So when I select New, notice by default it's going to receive into the sales floor sublocation, which is our primary sublocation, right? And that's what I want in my scenario. But if you had a back room that you would like to receive into, you can certainly define that. Okay, you can change it if you have permission to do so, or I would recommend you set up a default sublocation for receiving vouchers. Okay, so for our demonstration, we'll keep it at the sublocation code primary, which is sales floor. Grab a very specific item. Okay, that one right there. And I will receive 100 units. Perfect. And we will update. Done. Let's back out and let's go over to inventory. Okay, so let's locate that item. There it is, and let's select sublocation quantity. And as you can tell, 110 units is now available at the primary sublocation, which is my sales floor. Okay, that's it. That is sublocation management.